my name is Megan Mayhew and welcome to part 2 of our sewing machine video. In this video, you're going to thread the machine, learn a little bit about sewing settings, and sew a running stitch. Raise the presser foot, then turn the hand wheel towards you until the needle is in the highest position. The needle is in the highest position when the take-up eye is all the way up. Draw the thread from the spool on top of the machine and pass it under the thread guide. Then draw the thread down along the channel and pull it up around the bottom of the thread guide plate and up along the left channel. Firmly draw thread from right to left over the thread take-up lever and down into the take-up eye. Take thread down the left channel again and slip it behind the needle bar guide from the left. Pass the thread through the eye of the needle from front to back. Be careful not to tangle it as you pass it through. If you have trouble threading the needle, you can cut the thread at an angle or use damp fingers on the end to smooth any frayed edges. This is our final step before sewing. Make sure the presser foot is still raised and turn the hand wheel slowly towards you a few turns until you see the machine bring up the bobbin thread. The bobbin thread will come up through the needle hole. Bring the bobbin thread the rest of the way up by gently tugging on the needle thread. Pull the thread up gently until it is free from the machine. Untangle threads if needed and pull a few inches of thread back behind the presser foot. Moving from left to right, the first dial is the thread tension dial. Thread tension is important because if the tension is too high, your thread can break and the bobbin thread can come through the stitches. If the tension is too low, the needle will form loops of thread on the bottom side of your fabric and the stitches will not be sewn correctly. Balancing the thread tension depends on the sewing materials, how many layers of fabric there are, and the sewing method being used. The Janome My Style 100 has the numbers 3, 4, and 5 outlined. These are the average stitch tensions on the machine and can be used for most projects. The next dial is the pattern or stitch selector dial. This dial lets you choose the best stitch suited for your project. Never turn the pattern dial while the needle is in the fabric, as this could bend or break the needle. Pattern A is the straight stitch, which is a strong utility stitch used for reinforcing seams since it does not rip easily. Pattern C is the zigzag stitch, used to keep fabric edges from fraying. Pattern G is the knit stitch, a stitch used on medium to heavy fabrics where a narrow seam is needed. These are utility stitches. The patterns not mentioned are a variety of these basic stitches. Finally, we have the stitch length dial. This dial changes the length of the stitch. The higher the number, the longer the stitch. Stitch length selection can vary depending on the strength of the seam needed as well as the type of fabric. Now that you're familiar with the dials on the machine, we're going to adjust them and get ready to sew. Set your thread tension to 4. We're going to use a running stitch for this, so set your dial to A. And then stitch length doesn't matter, so you can choose any number. For this one, I'm using number 3. Now we're ready to sew. You might be wondering how the sewing machine pulls the fabric as you sew. The machine pulls the fabric along by having the presser foot push the fabric against the feed dogs, which move up and forward in time with the needle. Align the edge of your fabric under the foot, and while gently holding the thread towards the back, turn the hand wheel towards you, lowering the needle into the fabric until the eye is no longer visible. Next, lower the presser foot and smooth the thread towards the back to avoid getting them tangled. Slowly press down on the foot control and gently guide the fabric to keep it straight as the machine pulls it through. Sew in a straight line for a few seconds, then lift your foot off the foot pedal, stopping the machine. You've now sewn a running stitch. To finish your running stitch, press and hold the reverse stitch lever and sew several stitches in reverse at the end of the seam. You don't need to go very far. This is called a back stitch, and it secures the stitches so they do not unravel. To remove the fabric, raise the presser foot and gently pull the fabric toward the back of the machine. Snip the threads off close to the seam, leaving a few inches of thread behind the presser foot. That's all for part 2. In part 3, we're going to change the presser foot and needle and learn about the accessories compartment. See you there!